we look to 2025, some experts are keeping their eyes on more challenges to recruiting workers in what we know is already a tight labor market. A new study by a group called Indeed Flex took a closer look at current trends in the workforce, and they found 43% of businesses reported being short-staffed at least once a week. Joining us today is James Terry. He's the head of revenue for Indeed Flex. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Avery.
Okay, so before we look ahead to 2025, let's take a few steps back. Give us some background for people of, what led up to some of these struggles that we're now seeing today.
Yeah, well, it's great that we just saw the weather report. I feel like the staffing market has kind of been like the weather in Austin recently. It's been all over the place. You start in the pandemic and huge numbers of job losses and then a quick spike. We're noticing over the course of the past year, we're seeing that there's actually about an 8.5% decrease year over year in job postings, and that's according to Indeed. Now you take that though, and you look at it and you scroll out and say, actually pre-pandemic, we're still up over 11% on job postings. So while we've had a decrease year over year, we're still at pretty much a record level of job numbers if you're comparing to pre-2020 levels.
So lots of jobs still needing to be filled.
Exactly.
So I do want to take a closer look at some of the numbers from this survey that you all put out. You surveyed, it says 1,000 U.S. business owners and managers and found that 38% of them are struggling to recruit. So that speaks to exactly what we're talking about here. But what are some of the factors that are contributing to those recruitment struggles?
Yeah, so you think about it and you say, well, we're down year over year, but we're also up over the course of the past 4 or 5 years. Some of the things that are happening we're noticing is that because it's a little bit of a tight job market, Avery, it's really critical to make sure that there's speed in the hiring process. We find that candidates typically will get disengaged. If it takes more than a week to hear back on a job application, you have over a 50% drop-off ratio in those candidates continuing to engage. So speed is super critical. The other thing is that because of the pandemic, work from home is still a thing. And so people are demanding not just to be able to have flexibility in where they're working, but also the type of work that they have, potentially in the type of schedule that they might have. If you think about it, like Uber drivers and DoorDash, and there's so many different options for people out there where they can now choose where, when, how, sometimes how much they want to work for. And so job seekers are now demanding a little bit more flexibility than they were in the past.
Definitely some tips there for people who are trying to remain competitive in this market. Okay, I want to talk to you now, even just earlier today, we saw nurses marching outside of a medical center here. One of their biggest concerns was staffing challenges. And so are there industries like, say, healthcare or certain industries that are feeling this push a little more so than others, or is it across the board?
Yeah, it's funny, you kind of compare, as I had given you those numbers pre-pandemic, that there was obviously a huge increase in need for healthcare workers during that really, really devastating time in the world. And that's flatlined out a little bit, but there's still an increased need. If you think about the baby boomers and that generation getting closer to retirement, there's definitely more of a need for that type of labor. But there's also a long pipeline of time for people to get upskilled in those different areas. But actually, Avery, these challenges we're seeing are not just in the healthcare industry. Light industrial, hospitality, facilities management, call center, all these different industries are really struggling with their ability to be able to attract not just talent, but the right type of talent.
So despite some of the stats in the survey and some of the struggles we've talked about, your survey also found that more than half of people surveyed say they're still upbeat about what 2025 has in store. So what's the optimism? What's behind it?
Yeah, a huge percentage of people are thinking the economy is going to grow. And if you look at some of the numbers that just came out around inflation, inflation was lower than everyone thought, which speaks to potential continued Fed decreases in the rates. And so people are still relatively bullish on the economy and what's happening. And so it's really exciting to see that while there are difficulties in hiring, people are still feeling really strong about it. And so for businesses, they need to think about how are they going to differentiate. What are you going to do to be able to attract that best talent? Because it is a tough job market. And so what can you do to make sure that your recruitment processes are faster, that you have a really strong onboarding process, that you're giving the type of flexibility that you need? And that's one of the great things that Indeed and Indeed Flex is doing, is we're making sure that we're giving the power and control and choice to the job seekers to be able to decide where, when, and how they work.
Lots to watch as we head into the year. James, I'm sure we will be bothering you again, but thanks so much for the insight today.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, Avery.
We'll be back after the break.